Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our series of live careers webinars brought to you by the Hertfordshire Opportunities Portal, that is HOP, which is a website that we hope you will become really familiar with, particularly any of you that are students or attending schools in Hertfordshire, which is what the website is intended for. So today we are running a careers webinar to talk about careers in engineering, and we've got two fantastic panelists with us who are going to share their experiences with you and answer any questions that you've got or anything that you want to know about potential routes into engineering. So a couple of bits of housekeeping just to get you started. We can't see or hear any of you, so don't worry, we can't see or hear you. Your cameras and your microphones will automatically be switched off. Hopefully you can see and hear us, but you do have the opportunity to interact with us, and really do encourage you to take the opportunity to ask any questions to our panelists as we go through the session today. So this is your opportunity over the next hour really to ask any direct questions. And I do want to thank those of you that have registered. A lot of you have submitted questions already or stated things that you wanted to find out about, and we've tried to incorporate that into our initial conversation. But we have got a section designated to your questions. So the way that you do that is on your questions tab on your dashboard. If you click on that and open it out, it provides you with a text box, and then within the text box you can type in your question and that will come straight through to me. It won't be visible to anyone else, and then I will direct that question to either of our panelists. If there's either one of them that you specifically want to answer it, put their name at the front of it and I can make sure that it goes to them. So this session is being recorded, so we are recording live at the moment, and so I particularly want to congratulate those of you that are watching this as a live webinar and you've come home from school and you've decided that this is really good use of your time. So well done for taking those proactive steps in doing that one. So it is being recorded. It will be available to watch back. So if there's anything that you want to watch again, or if you can't stay for the whole session, the whole thing is being recorded. You will be able to watch it back via our HOP platform. So the purpose of today is to let you into a day in the life really of what a civil engineer does. And we'll cover engineering more broadly, but specifically we're going to think about civil engineering today. We'll talk about the different entry routes into engineering, so how you get there, and we'll think about the sorts of skills and qualities that good engineers need, and hopefully off the back of that you'll have some really good information about what your next steps might be. So whether that's choosing your GCSE subjects, choosing whether you're going to stay on in sixth form, whether you're going to go to college, whether you need to go to university. So we're going to try and cover all of those things for you today. So before we continue, I'm going to ask our two panelists to introduce themselves. So first of all, good afternoon, Callan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Could you tell everyone a little bit more about you?
Yeah, hi guys, my name's Callan. I'm a degree apprentice working for AECOM. I work in the development infrastructure sector, which is basically providing all the main infrastructure, drainage, roads, landscaping, utilities for sort of new build developments and highway schemes.
Thank you very much, Callan. We should say that you are very much one of our own. You went to school in Sandringham School in St Albans, and now you're working for your local company. Now, as you'll hear from Cole when he introduces himself, he's from a little bit further afield, but he's still an employee of AECOM and based in Hertfordshire. So good afternoon, Cole.
Hi, thanks, Gareth. Yes, my name is Carl Pledger. I'm a director at AECOM based in St Albans. I work in the design management team, but my background is in civil and structural engineering, and I have a degree in civil engineering from Sunderland University, and I'm also a member of the Association of Project Managers.
Okay, thanks very much. So thanks for those introductions, and any questions that you've got for Callan or for Cole, this is your opportunity to hear and interact directly with a real life civil engineer. So do think about getting your questions in and we'll make sure that we ask all of those on your behalf. So first discussion point really I want to cover is well, what is a civil engineer? So Cole, I'm going to throw that question to you to start with. What does a civil engineer do?
Now, civil engineering obviously covers many different aspects of what you're seeing, the environment. So when you're sat looking out of your window, or even on your way to school or whatever, you're going to drive along a road, you might cross a bridge along the way, you may take a train. All of that is aspects of civil engineering. the buildings that you see around you, the houses that you live in. Civil engineers will have been involved in the design and construction of them. All of the drainage networks that you see that are below the ground, the utilities, your power, your electric, all of that involves civil engineers in one way or another. And it's the design, the construction, the maintenance, the demolition of everything you see around you in the built environment.
Okay, thank you. And of course, there's
Yeah.
lots of different strands of engineering as well. So let me just go to Callan and say, why did you want to go into the civil engineering route and not, say, structural engineering?
So, I mean, when I was sort of looking around for the apprenticeship, I mean, I went to open evening at AECOM, which is obviously where I work now. And I met Carl. Carl sort of introduced me to the side of civil engineering, which I hadn't really seen, which is the development infrastructure, which I work in now, and sort of the aspects which are involved in it, sort of all the way from the beginning design phase, taking it all the way through to technical approval, and sort of seeing the finished product of what we use day in, day out. Is what sort of made me realise that wherever you go in the world, whatever you do, it's always going to be needed. So there's always going to be a demand for people in this sector, and obviously the skills you pick up along the way are greatly beneficial and sort of stay with you for life.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Colin, let me throw that question back to you around the different strands of engineering. I mean, how transferable are they? I mean, if you're a civil engineer, can you go into other strands of engineering? Does it happen, or is it really specialised?
So if I guess if you go off to university and study civil engineering, the sort of that course is broken down into various different elements, and Callan can probably give you more of an insight in what the current learning is compared to what I did when I went to university. But generally, civil engineering degrees will cover structural engineering, your typical civil engineering. There'll be geotechnical engineering, which is more about the grounds and foundations. We cover hydrology, which is sort of more water engineering, sort of it'll cover drainage. I did an awful lot about waves, I remember. You'll do a bit of environmental engineering as well. So you get a general ground, and just because you study civil engineering, it doesn't mean that then you're going to be stuck as a civil engineer. There are other elements of it you can go into. And I guess that's one. They're the sort of things you'll be introduced to either as an apprentice. You'll get opportunities to work in other departments, and similarly as a graduate with a large engineering company, you will get opportunities to go and try those different parts of engineering. Or you might find during your studies, you find a particular branch of engineering that you enjoy, and you know when you finish, that's what you want to go and do.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I think that's a really good description. We had in the questions we had in the registration, we had someone asked about flight and aeronautical engineering, which is a particular, I guess, branch of engineering. What's that likely to entail?
Obviously, aeronautical engineering is more about how aircraft is designed, how they're built, how they're powered, and I guess it's more akin to mechanical engineering. There'll be a lot of similarities with them, but I guess then because aeronautical engineering is more specialised, I would expect it to be specialist degrees and other courses that you could go on and do that. And again, you've got apprenticeship opportunities in our aeronautical engineering. One of our actual colleagues in the St Albans office did actually start out as an aeronautical engineer, as an apprentice. He's actually from St Albans. Not sure which school he went to, but he did actually start out as an aeronautical engineer and apprentice, and then moved into civil engineering, specifically water engineering, which is obviously, again, you sort of think water engineering is nothing like aeronautical engineering, but you'll find there's an awful lot of similarities between them. A lot of the sort of formula and theory that you would use for both of them will be very similar.
Sure. Okay. Callan, I mean, talk us through a day in your life then. I mean, we'll come on to talk about the apprenticeship element, so we'll talk about study time in a little while. But in terms of what you do on the job, what does your average day look like?
So I mean, mine at the moment is quite repetitive because I've been working on the same project for nearly a year and a half now. A lot of my work is based around the design of the elements which sort of come together and create the project as a whole. So typically at the moment, the project is coming to sort of technical approval stages. So early morning will be sort of admin work, picking up on emails, sort of aligning my tasks for the day. And then from there, it's really sort of a checklist. I've got a list of tasks which I need to complete, drawings I need to produce. So it's working away on sort of AutoCAD, specifically Civil 3D, looking at 3D elements, making sure everything's aligned. So how the surface sits in comparison to the drainage and how the swales link to the drainage, and make sure there's no clashes between utilities and drainage. And then producing drawings which then portray all the information which we're designing in 3D onto a 2D piece of paper, so the contractor can then go and design and build on site. So that's sort of a typical day for me. Obviously waking up 8 hours of work. So yeah, very repetitive at the moment, but we're making good progress, so it's all going well.
Yeah, and then Carl, I mean, you obviously you project manage now, which means that you have a team of engineers that are supporting the project. I mean, firstly, could you tell us a little bit about the project that you and your team are working on at the moment, and then perhaps you could tell us what would your engineers be doing, I don't know, at the moment, or what would they have been doing today, like specifically?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, the project I'm working on at the moment is the Canada Water redevelopment. So it's an area of London around the Canada Water underground station. It's a very sort of industrial and commercial development at the moment, but a lot of the existing buildings are all going to be demolished and it's going to be turned into a mixed use residential development, very, very vibrant part of London. So that's working, the client on that is British Land. So my role is as a project manager, sort of understanding what we want to achieve and then working out what we need to do to achieve that, how long it's going to take to achieve it, and how much it's going to cost to achieve it. And then I would monitor the teams. I manage multidisciplinary teams, so it's not just engineers. There's architects and landscape architects in amongst the teams that I manage, and my role is to monitor the progress, make sure that they're all doing what they're supposed to be doing and when they're supposed to be doing it, making sure that coordination is happening, because they're all working on different aspects of the project within the same plot. So they've got to make sure if someone's putting a pipe in the ground, it's not in the same position as a tree, for example. So it's just a matter of making sure everything's aligned and coordinated, and then monitoring the costs against that as well. So the team that I've got at the moment, like I say, there's we've got some highways engineers who are designing the roads. We have utility engineers who are designing the installation of all of the water, electric, telecoms, IT, and then we have the landscape architects who are sort of looking at the planting, how that integrates within the highway, and how it coordinates with all of the buried services that we have as well.
Yeah.
So I don't do any design anymore. It's always just making sure that check what other people are doing. Reporting against that. That's one of the big parts of my role now is financial and progress reporting. So it's writing reports, meeting with clients, and advising them what's going on, what the risks might be. That's always a big part of the role as well. And it's something that Callan would do as a designer. He would look at design risks, where my role is more looking at commercial risks and bringing those together.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's really fascinating. Particularly the webinar we recorded last week was on town planning. So we were talking to town planners who were, will be at the stage before this, where they'll be looking at the viability of, of this and the redevelopment of the area. So it's good to see how all these things link in and join up together. Callan, what do you enjoy most about your role? What are the best elements? How would you sell civil engineering?
I mean, I know previously I said my day is quite repetitive, but when I say repetitive, it's sort of the tasks, but every task is different in each scenario. So whereas one day I'll be working on one aspect of the project, looking at a utility clash, trying to work out how I can get the utilities to go around the drainage without causing any other issues. The next day I could be looking at why the road levels don't quite match up, and then having to work out what the differences are and a viable solution to do so without causing any issues further down the line. So I guess sort of the variedness of the tasks and problems that arise is sort of what keeps you on your toes and keeps you always thinking of different solutions that you can come up with.
Yeah, sure. And then, Carl, let me ask you the reverse question, because we really do want to present this warts and all account really of what these careers are like. But what do you think are the challenging things around becoming an engineer that perhaps if you're a 15 or 16-year-old with an aspiration to go into this, you may not be aware of, but you think as a professional in the industry, people should be aware of?
I think the most challenging part is demands on time and deadlines. That's one of the biggest and toughest things to sort of to meet. And there's times that your days are going to be long. You may lose a weekend here and there. Our clients have fixed deadlines that they need to do things by, and sometimes it's because if it's not done by that time, they don't get funding. So those deadlines are really, really important. So you really just got to do whatever is required in order to hit those deadlines. So that's probably the most challenging part, and it's even the build up to that deadline, because it's not just you finishing your work by that time. Your work then needs to go to other people to go through a check-in and a review process, and then maybe it comes back and you've got to make more changes and do it again. So and I know Callan has sort of lost some weekends over the last 12 months and had to work longer hours. So that for me, I think that's certainly in my career, that's always been one of the most challenging ones. Is you work 37, 40 hours a week contractually, but often you might find that you've got to work an awful lot more than that.
Yeah, of course. Okay, I can see there's already some questions that are coming in, which is fantastic. So do keep your questions coming in. We will make sure that we ask all the questions that you do submit through to us. There's some of them we may cover in the next section. So want to just talk about entry routes into the industry.
Just before you move on, just like Callan's about to come to one of the most exciting parts of being a civil engineer. So he spent the last 12 months sat at a computer designing drainage, drawing up drainage, producing drawings and lots of documents that are then handed over to a contract. That contractor now is going to start building what Callan's drawn, and that's for me one of the most exciting parts of being a civil engineer. Certainly a design civil engineer sat in the office is when what you've designed is actually getting built and you can actually go and see it get built, and then just seeing the finished product that's one of the most exciting parts of being an engineer, is seeing what you've designed actually complete and built and people using it.
Yeah, sure. I can see Callan's eyes lighting up as you were saying that, actually. So yeah, that realization of something you worked very hard on actually coming to fruition. Yeah, I can really see that.
Yes.
Talk about entry routes. Yeah, sorry, Callan. Look.
I was just over the past 12 months, like Carl said, I've been working on the same project, and when Carl and I was pestering him, can we go up to site? Can we go up to site? I've been pestering other colleagues that I work with to go up. So now hopefully it's going to be sort of a weekly visit for me, or by every fortnight going up, seeing site, seeing the progress, and producing sort of progress reports, which is going to be another new aspect of the job for me, which I haven't yet touched upon. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and best of luck with that. Now, Callan, you've gone down the degree apprenticeship route, but I know lots of people watching this at the moment will be thinking, I really want to go to university, I want to do the pure degree. So this isn't for us to try and sell degree apprenticeships to all of you watching this at the moment, but certainly we want to make sure that you're aware that there are genuinely some really, really credible options. And Callum, whilst so you're doing the degree apprenticeship route, I know lots of your friends and lots of your peers have gone down that pure degree route. So, I mean, tell us, what does the degree apprenticeship actually entail, first of all? So just explain what a degree apprenticeship is and how it differs from a pure degree.
So the degree apprenticeship, I mean, a lot of you are probably aware, is where you work for a company and they sort of cover your fees for uni, or you can provide the funding yourself. But while they're obviously providing the uni tuition for you, you get to work for them full time. They let you go on a day release or on block release. It just depends how the institution you're working for or studying at breaks it up. So I do day release every Monday. I go up into London, London South Bank University, and do a day's worth of study every week. So yeah, in terms of the apprenticeship, personally, I went down this route because I know sort of in the long term, getting experience is a major factor for employers. So by the time I finish my degree, it's a 5-year course. Obviously, due to the time of only being at uni 1 day a week, they've had to lengthen it. Typically, it would be 3 years. So yeah, I went down that route to gain the experience, which I think in future, at the end of the 5 years with a degree and 5 years experience, is going to be a lot more appealing to future employers and obviously the employer which I'm currently with.
Yeah, okay. So let's delve a little bit deeper into that then, because you said to me before we were talking beforehand, when you were, maybe year 10, year 11, you'd never heard of a degree apprenticeship, had you? So it was something that you've gone out and found out about yourself. Cole, from your perspective, or from an employer like AECOM's perspective, what's the value in a degree apprentice who starts with the company straight from school, usually after A levels, compared to maybe a graduate? Because I know that you do have a really good graduate scheme as well. So what might be the difference between the sorts of experiences that either of those would gain?
There's probably not an awful lot. I mean, obviously with a degree apprentice, they're coming in with virtually zero experience in engineering. They've got no practical experience or theoretical knowledge at all. So we understand that's coming in. We don't have any expectations that we're going to have somebody that already has some knowledge or deep knowledge of civil engineering. But obviously what they bring is that they sort of, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it, but it's sort of, they're starting at the bottom, but we know that they're going to grow. So they when they come in, they'll do the less glamorous tasks of the team. Whereas if you've got a graduate coming in, we've already got expectations of a graduate coming in, that they've already got a technical knowledge. But I don't think we would value either more than the other. We appreciate that a graduate and apprentice are coming in at completely different levels. So they're not comparable. But what we do is that we acknowledge that with the apprentices, by the time they've graduated, they've also got 5 years experience. So at that point, you've got a graduate coming in with a degree, the same as the apprentice has got, but the apprentice has got this additional experience. So we do make sure that that's recognised. So we do have sort of graded pay scales for apprentices, and their pay goes up every year. When they pass their exams, they go up. So it gets to a point that when the graduates come in, our graduate apprentices are actually paid more than the graduates coming in. So we acknowledge that they've got experience and a qualification. But as them both coming in at an entry level, then we don't compare. We don't have any expectations from either.
Sure, and we know that what you're saying there, for AECOM, that would also be the same for other major engineering companies as well. I think we've seen that there's been an increasing uptake from engineering companies to go down that degree apprenticeship route as well.
Yeah.
So it's something for the industry.
There is a reason behind all of the degree apprenticeship thing now, how it's sort of become much more popular. But I don't think you need to go into that. But it was the same for me when I started out my career. I went straight from A levels and started off as an apprentice. But once I graduated, my employer was a local authority I worked for. Made sure that the effort that you'd put into sort of working and your degree, so you got your degree and your qualifications, that it was recognised.
Yeah, no, okay. So look, Callum, let's go back to when you were at school. So when you're in, think about sort of year 11. What GCSEs did you do first of all? And did you already have engineering in mind when you were choosing and completing your GCSEs?
I'm going back to GCSEs, feels like a while ago now. But I did sort of all the standard ones, English, maths, that, and then I did business and economics, I did geography and PE, sort of my optional ones. And to be honest, back then I had absolutely no idea what I sort of wanted to go into. So yeah, I mean, sort of fast forwarding that on to sort of A levels. Choosing my A levels, I still had no idea what I wanted to do really, and I chose to do physics, maths, and PE. So two which you can say are relevant or are relevant to what I do now, and one which is not so. And so far, it hasn't affected anything which I kind of put myself forward for in my career, because I have the physics and maths behind me. So yeah, you don't have to worry about not knowing what you want to do. I mean, one bit of advice I will give is just sort of do what you enjoy, and that way you'll fall into something you want to do.
Sure, which of course you've done. Cole, from an employer's perspective, are there any A levels that you would particularly recommend that anyone watching this at the moment seriously consider doing, because they will be really relevant to engineering?
Definitely maths and physics. They're sort of the engineering is heavy on the maths and science, particularly the physics side of it. Geography is another very good one that's quite transferable. And I think any A levels that perhaps are more sort of essay based, report writing kind of skills that you'll learn from them. They're the key ones, but they're definitely physics and maths we would look for somebody to have.
Sure. Okay.
But obviously, if you do have other options, if you've picked A levels that aren't going to get you onto a civil engineering degree course, there are other options that you could go down in order to bridge that gap. If you're when I did my A levels, I did, what the heck did I do? History, English language, and sports studies, which are completely and utterly irrelevant to engineering at all. So I actually did an HNC or HND in civil engineering. So there's less onus on the A levels that you've actually done. So an HNC, HND is the equivalent of the first year of a degree. So if you were to do an HNC or HND in civil engineering, you could then take that and go on to a degree course, but you would join it in the second year.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Callum, just thinking back to university, and for your degree apprenticeship, you are a student at South Bank University down in London, but I know you've got lots of friends that are doing engineering degree courses as pure ones as well. Are there universities you'd recommend people have a look at more than others?
I have to admit, when I was sort of doing my research before I started out, I didn't really kind of look too much into the unis. For me, it was more the companies that I was getting into, because if I knew if I was getting into a reputable company, the training that they would provide was obviously going to be some of the best that they can find. So in terms of that, I went up to South Bank and had a look, but like I said, it was mainly the company which I looked at. But a few of my friends, I know a couple of them study at Cambridge, some study down at Southampton, a couple up in Leeds. So there's a lot of varied ones, and all the courses sort of differ slightly, but overall a lot of the same concepts and topics are covered to a very similar standard.
Sure. Okay. Carl, we've spoken about the sort of qualifications then, but what are the sorts of skills and qualities that a good civil engineer has? Perhaps some of those softer skills.
I think you've got to be inquisitive. That's really important, and I think you've got to be practical minded, pragmatic, and I think one of the most important ones is just have a good ability to manage processes. Engineering is sort of very process driven, so I think you've got to to be appreciative of processes and sort of know how to navigate them, and I think just sort of being you're going to be under pressure. Somebody who's quite calm and level headed often make good engineers as well.
Yeah.
Communication is massive. Communication is absolutely massive. So the ability to communicate both face to face and in both written and I guess graphical means as well. You're going to spend a lot of time drawing things, but also reading drawings as well. And civil engineering is not just about sat at a desk at a computer. There are other elements of it. You'd be on site actually building things. So you've got to be able to interpret the information that's given to you as well.
Can I just add something at the end of that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Carl's obviously touched upon being able to read drawings and produce them. I mean, that was something I had no experience in at all whatsoever. And it's something which I feel like I've actually developed quite a lot because I've spent a lot of time doing them, producing them and reading them. So that was something that quickly came into your head about, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Don't worry about it. It's something you pick up quite quickly and develop on a lot. So
yeah. Are there any skills or are there any activities that you would recommend people start doing now that might get them into the mindset of an engineer? I mean, you've spoken about drawings there and perhaps reading drawings. What would you recommend someone doing at the moment before they physically access an engineering program?
I'd say from my point of view, I would definitely say not sort of any tasks in particular, but just get work experience. Go out, reach out to companies, ask if you can go for a week's work experience, even just shadow for a couple of days, because that way you'll pick up different tasks which people of varied sort of levels do. So obviously you can go and see apprentices, you can go see directors, managers, principal engineers, but just ask around, and like Carl said, just be inquisitive and have like the willingness to learn from them, and that would be a big thing. Sort of, I did a week's work experience, and that helped me massively.
Sure, Carl, any?
I think I would just second that. To be honest, I think one of the most important things as an employer, when somebody's coming to you that doesn't have, they're coming fresh from school or straight out of university. Yep, okay, you've got your degree, sort of well done, but what extra things are you going to bring? So I think it's really, really important to experience things, get involved in things, at university, join clubs. They don't have to be engineering clubs. I think it's just a matter of demonstrating that you've got some form of experience, whether it be part-time jobs or you've been joined in with a club or you've helped out at a school. Things like that I think are just really important, and it sort of grows your interpersonal skills, and that's as an employee, they're the kind of things that we look for. They're the differentiators. Yeah, that I don't think there's anything I would say specifically geared towards engineering, other than if you can get work experience at an engineering company, then that's great. But just to show willingness to learn, and that you've got some experience of life, which is
Sure.
you know, it's difficult at such a young age to get that, but you know, you can do it by volunteering, part-time jobs, lots of opportunities out there, even just helping out in school with the younger years.
Yeah, okay, now some really good advice there. Now, this is, I think we probably know the answer to this already, but this is where we just want to reflect on the prospects for engineering, and just to make sure that we are talking about a career in an industry that we know is a growth one, and we know that particularly in Hertfordshire, there's going to be huge demand for. So, Carl, have you noticed, are there any trends in the industry at the moment? Are there any types of engineers that there's now more demand for, or is work moving in a certain direction?
I don't think so. I mean, it's becoming more and more technically driven. There's more and more looking towards autonomy of engineering. You know, it's really heavily moving into the 3D world now. So I think anybody that's got access to software, or that perhaps that sort of technically minded and can pick up on things like that really quickly, they're sort of gold dust in offices now. So that's really important. But I think just in general, I think we've got a massive boom coming up in engineering. You know, the pandemic's affected everybody, and one of the things that all countries throughout the world are going to be looking at doing is investing in the countries, because it's going to create job opportunities, it's going to invigorate the economy, and one of the easiest ways to do that is infrastructure, which is what civil engineers do. So we know all about HS2 that's ongoing, and they're going to want to push that through, although they've just announced it's going to be a bit of a cutback on how far it's going to go. There's new railway lines, or old railway lines reopening. You know, we're looking at the green economy now is becoming more and more important. So we're looking at different ways of how we heat our homes, how we use fuel. So there's just a massive demand for engineers on it now, not even just on the horizon. It's now, and there's so many job opportunities out there at the moment in engineering.
Sure, okay. Well, I think that's a really positive spin to be giving us. And now AECOM is a leading engineering company based right in the heart of Hertfordshire, in St Albans. So I mean, just looking at where we had registrations from today, there was sort of a large number of students from Queen's School in Bushy, and from Watford Girls, and Fernhill up in Letchworth, well represented as well.
And
so
don't forget, engineers aren't just in here in the UK. You know, as a civil engineer, you've got opportunities to travel the world, working on some of the biggest and best projects around the globe.
Yeah, that's it. So it's a global reach for it as well.
Yeah.
Callan, if I could come to you, what are the sort of progression routes that an engineer might go into? So I guess, you know, a lot of you within the industry will remain engineers or civil engineers for the whole of your working career, but are there natural areas that you see yourself perhaps branching off to?
Yeah, I know we sort of chatted about this sort of off camera briefly beforehand, didn't we? But with sort of an engineering degree, due to the background of them being very maths based and sort of physics based, sort of at the end of careers, I know quite a few people that I've spoken to, they were civil engineers, they've gone off into banking. Some have gone off into accountancy, very similar to banking. But there's also the route or possibility to go into quantity surveying as well. So there's sort of varied routes that you can go. But I know a lot of civil engineers, just due to the demand of work, sort of naturally just go through the progressions of sort of working their way up the ranks.
Sure. When we spoke about the importance of the engineering industry, certainly within Hertfordshire, but engineering is, of course, explicitly wedded to the construction industry as well. So you just reflected on some roles within construction too there, which means that there's lots of really, really good prospects. Now I'm going to go. This is always my favourite section of the webinar, when we take questions that are coming from those of you that are watching this live at the moment. And I know I've got to work out how I scroll down my dashboard of questions because there's so many that have come in. So let's just let's just go through these in the order that they've come in on. So first of all, hi. I was wondering what I would have to do to become a design engineer and what I should do after GCSE and A level. So Callan, I'm going to give you that question.
I think I sort of briefly touched on this to begin with. Like I said, physics and maths for A levels would be a good start. If the degree that you're looking to go down into is sort of remotely similar to what I'm into, I would say further maths would be a brilliant sort of subject to take, because a lot of the concepts covered in that are covered in sort of the first year of the degree that I've done. So in hindsight, taking further maths would have been a brilliant route for me. But other than that, it would be just reach out to companies which you know sort of do the work which you like, ask for work experience and ask to volunteer and just anything like that. So, I mean, it's not even to get the experience, but get your name sort of out there, get your foot in the door so they remember you. That'd be sort of a big step forward.
Now,
design engineering has got
a
a lot to do. Design engineering, I think, has got a lot to do with sort of product development and materials as well. So, you know, I think it's Sandringham. I think they do an A level in materials, is it? Or I think they do some qualification in materials or product development. So those kind of A levels qualifications are good to do as well.
Yeah, fine. I mean, the actual degree course, I know there is a whole range of degree courses that you can do at the many universities within this country. Some of them will be engineering. There'll be a fairly broad cross section. Some of them will be really specific. I mean, just generally, Carl, would you recommend someone go down that very sort of broad approach to cover engineering as a whole, or do you think it's good ideas to start specialising or thinking about specialising at 18?
I think if you know you want to be an engineer, but not entirely sure which branch of engineering you want to go down, then I would go for a general engineering degree. But if you think I want to be a geotechnical engineer, for example, then I would suggest doing the specific degree that's specialised to that, or you could go down civil engineering, as we touched on before. If you do a civil engineering degree, you do a bit of structures, you do a bit of highways, you do a bit of water. You know, you get to dabble around all of them, and you come out with a civil engineering degree. And after your degree, you could then go and choose what branch you want to go down. And once you're in there, you can still move around. You know, it's sort of like you might feel old coming out of university at sort of 21, 22-year-old, but you're not. You've got a long, long time to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Next one, is civil engineering any close to architecture? So we talk about some of the transferable skills. So how do you think about that, Cole? Civil engineering, architecture, are there links?
They're very different, but they go hand in hand. So an architect would design a building. This is me putting in very simple terms. An architect would design the look and feel of a building. A civil engineer makes it stand up. That's sort of, I think that's a more simple way to put it. That's it. An architect's about what a building looks like, the shape of the building, etc. And then an engineer comes along and does the clever stuff and makes it stand up.
Sure. Okay. So fundamentally very different skills, but you know the two of them are going to work hand in hand as part of an overall.
They have to. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering what I have to do to become a car design engineer. Callan, what do you think about that? Car design engineer.
So I mean, it's sort of at the stage everyone's sort of listening to. I take it there sort of year 10 to 13, and at the moment I keep going back to the same point, but it is just get yourself out there, introduce yourself to the companies. One thing I did, I went to an apprenticeship expo. So I went to one in Milton Keynes. There was various companies there. I spoke to people that worked for Nissan, Hyundai, McLaren. I think the Red Bull team were there as well. And I was just speaking to those, understanding what sort of things I need to do. if I wanted to go into car design, what I needed to do to get there. So I mean, I can't speak from experience of knowing what it is to do to get into car design, so obviously I haven't been down that route, but I can just sort of say the things that I did to get into civil engineering and sort of transfer those over and take them with you.
Yeah, okay. The next question is specifically for you, Callum. What is the biggest project you've worked on?
So, I mean, I guess you could say I have touched on things with HS2. I've done a little bit of drainage design for a roundabout phase, which is linked to that. But I think the one which I've worked on for the longest and sort of biggest overall would be a housing development up in opposite Luton in Houghton Regis. This is the one which is going for technical approval at the moment. I sort of, Carl was my line manager when it all kicked off, so he sort of kicked off the project. I was there from the beginning. I started out looking at the very basic designs, and then sort of taken the drainage, the roads and the utilities all through 2D design, looking at levels, and then transferring that into 3D models, so you can physically look at how the road is going to sit on the existing ground and where the drainage sits below that. And then, like I said beforehand as well, transferring that onto a piece of paper so the people on site can read it, look at it and go, okay, the level on site here needs to be raised. This is where this lamppost is going to go. Here's where this tree is going to go. So yeah, I mean, that's the biggest project I've worked on. It's been going for about a year and a half now. It's sort of nice to be sort of starting to look at what it's going to be like in real life.
Okay. Carl, I mean, you've obviously been involved in many projects, but how do you judge the size of a project? Is it based on its budget? Is it its scale or prestige?
It could be anything. It could be absolutely anything. It depends on the project. I mean, if it was a bridge, you'd probably judge the size of it on the span. If it was a building, perhaps you would measure it on the square meterage that's included in it. If it was a tower, then you would judge it by the height. You could judge it on the value. So there's many different ways that you can measure the size of a project.
Yeah, okay. Well, with that in mind, what's the biggest project you've worked on?
Oh, height wise, it'll be a roughly 1.2 kilometer tall tower that's currently under construction. Fee wise, sort of value wise, it would probably be the Dubai Metro. And I think if I look square meterage wise, it was a large mixed use development in Iran that was around, it was about 1 million square foot in built up area, which is pretty significant. So I've worked, so I've spent 12 years in the Middle East, where it's sort of money's no object on a lot of projects there. So that's where the biggest ones have been that I've worked. But the biggest ones aren't always the best. Probably the most enjoyable ones I've done have been smaller ones.
Yeah. Okay. Now, we kind of answered this one earlier. I'm interested in becoming a flight engineer, and I'm not sure how to reach there. We spoke about what a flight and aeronautical engineer was earlier, but the question then goes on. My friend is already doing 3 A levels. However, she is thinking about doing further maths as well, which we spoke about, Callan. She wants to become a mechanical engineer. Would you recommend taking further maths? Now, you may just be repeating your answer from earlier, but let's try and answer that question as it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically probably going to be a repeat of my answer earlier, but like I say, if it's mechanical engineering degree, it's sort of anything like the civil engineering with the maths side of things, further maths would definitely be sort of a beneficial thing to take, because if you learn it the year prior, when you go over it in the first year at uni, it'll be sort of a walk in the park. Whereas for me, it was a lot more content which I had to learn, whereas some people were just relearning it. So it's sort of being a competition.
Yeah. I think it would very much depend on as well the university that you want to go and study at. You might find that they say that you need maths and further maths, Well, you've got that's what they would expect you to have. And I guess if you're going to study mechanical engineering at somewhere like Oxford or Cambridge, everybody else that's applying's probably got maths and further maths.
Yeah.
Where if you apply to a lesser university, they might be happy that you've only got maths and no further maths.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, that's a really important point there. So anyone, when you're looking through your UCAS application, really do look very, very carefully at exactly what the entry requirements are, the way that the course is delivered, because two courses may look similar at the headline level, but once you delve into the detail, you might find there's some real differentials there, which can be really significant. This is a good question. Any advice on what students taking a gap year should do? So, Carl, I mean, as an employer, if you use someone who's taken a gap year, and I'm guessing that's probably between A levels and then starting university, what do you think of when you see someone's done a gap year? Is that always a good thing? Does it raise any red flags, or is there devil in the detail?
I don't think it does. I think what I would look for is just that they've done something. They haven't just sort of sat around doing nothing. Is the thing that they've got up and done. Even if it's just been traveling, it doesn't even mean you've had a job. You maybe gone off and, I don't know, done football coaching in America for a year, or you might have sort of bummed around the Far East for a year. It really doesn't matter. I mean, my son's just started university in September this year, but he had a year out. He doesn't like to call it a gap year, but he had a year after doing his A levels to going off to uni, and he went and got a job at the local Tesco for a year just to save up money ready for uni.
Yeah. So you talk about gaining that rich life experience that comes through with someone once you meet them in that interview process. So as you said, it doesn't matter. Maybe you're trying to build villages in deprived areas around the world, or if you're working for a year, it's gaining that life experience that the gap year is there to try and
just demonstrate you haven't wasted a year.
Yeah.
And just been sitting around playing on your Xbox for a year.
Yeah. Callan, any of your friends or anyone in your network that that's done a gap year and really gained something out of that?
Yes, so a lot of my friends did take a gap year. Unfortunately, the first year of uni was the year that COVID all kicked off. So a lot of them did plan to go travelling. I know a few of my friends were going to Australia for 6 months, 3 days before we went into lockdown. So unfortunate for them. But if a lot of people do tend to take a gap year to go travelling. One thing that a lot of my other friends have done for their third year at uni, they've taken a year out, but to do it in industry. So obviously they do the first 2 years of uni, go and take a year in industry to gain that experience for future employers, and potentially book themselves a place after their degree at the employer they've done their experience at, and then obviously going back to finish their degree next year.
Sure. Okay. Next question. This is a really good question, actually. What jobs are there specifically around environmental engineering? So, I mean, Carl, you touched on perhaps, the green economy and the significance of green construction. Now, so how is engineering keeping up with the environmental issues and concerns?
Well, it's moving very, very quickly, and it's probably going to be a sort of a very much a boom market. I imagine it's going to become a very popular branch of engineering. I mean, we've got an environmental team in our office in St Albans, so they do a lot of work around advising developers and what they should be looking at introducing into the developments. They do sort of a lot of energy modelling. So if you've got an existing building, they can do energy modelling to see where energy is being lost or wasted, and then provide advice on how to improve the sort of the rating of a building. So there's many sort of different branches of environmental engineering again, and it just keeps growing every day. With everything we've seen being talked about at COP up in Glasgow recently, advising developers on, okay, come, I think it's 2025, any new houses aren't allowed to have gas central heating in them. So how do developers heat houses, what's the most economical way and environmentally friendly way for them to do that. So we've got a team that in the St Albans office that have been looking at ground source heat pumps. Don't ask me to go into much more detail than that, but going around and advising lots of developers on that, and sort of doing studies ourselves, a bit of research and development into that, and working very closely, normally very closely with mechanical engineers and the electrical engineers, building services engineers. So looking at links again, if you environmental engineering, you could then move across into building services engineering and vice versa.
For sure. Okay. And another question about similarities with architecture. I think I'm guessing the person who's asking this question is really trying to decide whether they want to go down an engineering route or an architecture route. But the question is, could you go into civil engineering, then into architecture in the future?
Yes, it's the short answer. I'd probably one of the world's most famous, I want to call him a designer rather than architect, is Santiago Calatrava. So if anybody wants to Google him and research him, but he started out life as an engineer. As an architect. He's sort of done it the other way, and he basically got fed up of engineers telling him he couldn't do things, so he decided to go and become an engineer. So he's a qualified architect and a qualified structural engineer, and so he just does it all himself now. He got sick of engineers telling him what he couldn't do.
Give us his name again, Carl, so people can get onto Google.
It is Santiago Calatrava.
Okay. And Callum, from your perspective, I mean, is architecture something that you would consider going into?
Yeah, quite topical. One of my colleagues on the course, he actually has done an architecture degree, and he's now doing, through an apprenticeship route, a civil engineering degree as well. So he's obviously seen both sides. And we were doing a sort of a topic recently about sketching, and I mean, his sketching was unbelievable compared to the rest of us. So obviously he spent 7 years prior, obviously at uni, doing sketches, learning how to sketch, and he's now understanding that sometimes the beam that he puts holding up a whole floor isn't actually strong enough to hold it. So he's sort of realizing what he thinks looks good isn't always practical. So it's quite interesting to speak to him, but yeah, it's definitely a feasible option to do.
Okay.
And what if somebody is trying to make the mind up sort of between perhaps engineering and architecture, there is one specific discipline that branches both of them, and that's facade engineering. And you often find when you look at the facades of buildings, the people who design them are either an architect or an engineer.
Yeah.
So that's that's an opportunity for an overlap. Saying, I'm not really sure what I want to do. You could pick architect, pick engineering, think, oh, well, I'll go down the middle and do facades.
Sure. Okay. Well,
that's a big discipline all in itself.
Yeah. Okay. I've got one more question, but there may be a follow-up question to it. I'm just going to ask for some clarification. But the question is, are there any one-year programs available for students with A levels? So thinking about, so once you finish your A levels at 18, are there any, I guess, perhaps level 3 or level 4 courses that initially are a year? I don't know whether either of you know the answer to that. The person who's asked that question, if you just want to clarify whether you mean as a degree program or as a sort of a stopgap in between, we'll try and answer that one. But in the meantime, are you aware of any other routes apart from the traditional degrees or degree apprenticeships?
Not 1 year. I mean, there's a lot of universities will do foundation courses, which are a year. They're often geared up to people who don't have this, the correct A levels to go directly into engineering. So what you can do is do a foundation course. So that would be an option. Like say, that's normally a year, and then that foundation course gets you onto the degree course.
Sure. Callan, are you aware of any one-year programs?
Not to my knowledge. The only thing I would say very similar to a foundation course might be the same thing, but a HNC/HND be sort of the only other thing, which then feeds into, like Carl said earlier, feeds into the second year of a degree, and that's the
Yeah.
only thing I know of.
Okay. Well, the only thing I can add to that is, and I haven't looked it up because I've only just seen the question now. We've got 4 fantastic further education colleges within Hertfordshire. So we've got West Herts College around in Watford, North Herts up in Stevenage, Oakland's in St Albans and Welwyn Garden City, and Herts Regional down in Broxbourne and Ware. And quite often they will offer level 3 courses in engineering or equivalent that may be 1 year initially. And I think a lot of people, so if you're doing A levels, or you'll be doing level 3, and I think a lot of people assume that, well, if I've done A levels, why would I then go and do a level 3 course? But sometimes actually going, I say going sideways, but going in and then focusing on something that you really want to do, it sometimes taking that sideways movement to then take a step up or to find out a little bit more about a subject can be really, really useful. So if that's what you mean by that question, I do recommend that you have a look at either West Herts College, North Herts College, Oakland's or Herts Regional, or indeed any of the other colleges that are around Hertfordshire, and see if they offer any level 3, maybe HNC or HND courses that may be then a good gateway to finding out a little bit more about the industry.
I've just actually done a very quick. I've just done a very quick Google. So an HNC is a 1-year course, and it's equivalent to the first year of university, and an HND is a 2-year course, which is equivalent to the first 2 years of university.
Okay, all right.
I thought they were the same thing, and one was part-time and one was full-time, but no, it's not.
Yeah, okay, so that may well be something worth looking into. Okay, right, so finally, before we close up, I'm conscious it's just ticked over 5:30. Just want a bit of a recap, and going to suggest perhaps some websites that you may want to have a look at now if you want to find out more about engineering. So Cole, you've given me some details here of some really good industry bodies here that have got some really good resources on their website. So do you just want to explain the 3 on the left of the screen there and who they are?
So obviously this will be applicable to not just engineering, it'll be applicable to other careers as well, is once you've completed your degree, you look at going to get a job and you build up experience, and then the next step in your career would be to get a professional qualification. So these 3 that we've got on the left is the Institute of Civil Engineers, the Institution of Structural Engineers, and then the Institute of Water and Environmental Management. So these are professional qualifications that you'll get based on your degree, or what other qualifications you may have, and largely experience. So these are the steps that if you look at these websites will set out the various levels of membership that can go from sort of an incorporated up to chartered, or a fellow sort of like the top professional qualification you can generally get. What's really important with these and similar organizations in other disciplines is to check what the base requirements are for your qualifications. For example, with the Institute of Civil Engineers, to become chartered, you need a master's degree, not a bachelor's degree, although you still can become chartered, but it'll take you a lot longer and be more onerous. So it's really important that you check out the professional organizations in engineering or architecture, whatever other field you're perhaps looking at going into, to make sure that you're on the correct course at the correct university, because not all universities are recognized either. So really important and worthwhile having a look at those.
Sure, yeah, make sure you do. The QR code next to them obviously will take you directly to their sites. And then also I've given you the QR code there. So that is AECOM's recruitment and vacancies page on there. So even if you're not thinking about getting a job or looking for a job imminently, you might just want to have a look at that and see the sorts of opportunities and posts they are. And if you keep looking at that, you'll probably find one very similar to the opportunities that Callum took up a few years ago as well. So it's well worth having a look at that. So we're very, very fortunate. If engineering is something you want to go to and you're in Hertfordshire, we've got a fantastic employer in the very, very heart of Hertfordshire in St Albans who can provide some wonderful opportunities for you that both Callum and Cole have benefited from. Okay, well, look, I think we've answered all the questions that have come in now. So some really, really good questions that have come in. So for those of you watching, particularly those of you that are watching live, we hope you found this session really, really informative. We hope it's given you some really good tips for your next steps and the next things that you might want to do. So thank you so much for spending your time when you come home from school to take part and to participate in this webinar. But of course, a massive thank you to both Callan and to Carl for giving up their time this afternoon and sharing their knowledge and experience with you. So Carl and Callan, thanks ever so much. Really, really appreciate you coming on.
Very welcome.
Today.
No worries, thank you.
Just finally, before we go, just want to make sure that you are aware of our page on HOP and our social media channels. So if you click on that QR code you can see there, that will take you to our page of all the virtual encounters. So we've been running these webinars on a weekly basis for the last 18 months or so. There's a whole variety of different careers that are covered in there. We did actually talk about engineering way back in summer 2020, so there'll be a similar video there. I think another AECOM employee, actually, possibly someone on the graduate scheme. But there is a range of different career topics that are covered on this, and we did town planning last week, which we kind of touched on today as well. So you may well find there are other things in there that interest you, may well interest your friends or your family too. So do have a look at our HOP website and have a look at our social media handles. So thanks ever so much for joining us. We wish you the very, very best in the next stages of your careers. Have a very, very pleasant evening.